On a pleasant day, I decided to go for a mountain hike with a few of my friends. On a few hours' drive from the city, a hiking track was built. I had loved going for hikes since childhood. My father always took me for hikes during vacations, so this track was familiar to me. It was almost noon when we reached there. This day, there weren't many people, but a few groups here and there. Our plan was to complete the hike and then camp for the rest of the night nearby. We started our hike, taking our hiking sticks in our hands and backpacks on our backs. Almost halfway through the hike, I was drenched in sweat. We decided to take a break for a few minutes and then continue the rest of the hike. Some of my friends were quite ahead of us. Shortly after we started climbing again, we met a stranger, probably there for the hiking. But he seemed a little lost. He asked us for the directions and where this track went. His questions seemed odd. If he was there for hiking, he must have studied the map or carried one with him. Another strange thing that I noticed was that he wasn't carrying any backpack, nor had any stick in his hands. His clothes were worn out too. From the looks of him, he looked like a homeless person. Somewhat creepy vibes were felt while talking to him. I quickly told him what he asked and hurried in, going far from him. After a few minutes, when we were out of his range, I asked my friends if they got the off vibes from him, and they all agreed. Almost after 2 hours, we finally completed our hike. The view from the top of the mountains has always fascinated me, and so it did today. We stopped for half an hour at the top, drank water, ate snacks, and went back down after being energized. The hike back down was comparatively less enthusiastic and a little bit boring. We were tired and wanted to set up the camp and rest for a while. When we reached halfway where we met that creepy stranger, I told my friends who were ahead of us about him. While I was talking, one of the friends pointed at something and asked if that was the guy I was talking about. To my surprise, he was still there sitting under a tree. He looked up toward us and I felt chills in my spine. We hurried from there and covered the rest of the hike, mostly silently. When we reached the foot of the mountain, it was getting dark. We went on for camping. Decide on a spot and start putting up our camp. After that, we started a bonfire and ate the food we brought with us, laughing and talking. We were having a good time, out in the mountains, enjoying free of all the worries of the world. While talking, one of my friends joked, saying, "What if that stranger on the hiking trail would have followed us here?" Everybody shut him up, as, why would he say something so scary? Just like that time went by joking around. Late in the night, we went to our camps for rest. We agreed on guarding the camp in the teams of 2. At first, one of my friends agreed to guard with me, as we weren't feeling too tired. We were sitting with our backs towards camp and facing towards the fire. We talked in a slow voice while being alert. Suddenly we heard noise coming from the bush nearby. We became alert and somewhat scared. We thought it would be some wild animal and didn't go for checking. After a few minutes, the noise started coming again, and this time it felt like someone walking. Our senses became highly alert. We decided to go and check. While we were standing up, something appeared from behind the bush and started making its way toward us. When that thing started making sense in the light of fire, we saw that it wasn't a thing but a person. Upon coming near, I was shocked to see that it was the same stranger we met on the hike. Me and my friend looked at each other, signaling as saying what to do now. We maintained our composure somehow and kept standing there. When he reached near, he asked us if he could stay with us tonight. We apologized and said that we didn't have space for one more person, as he clearly looked suspicious. He stood there thinking something, and then suddenly he took a knife out of his pocket and pointed it at us. A scream left our mouth, alerting the others inside the camp. They hurried out and saw what was happening outside. He started threatening us that if we didn't let him stay the night, he would harm us. We didn't know what to do in that situation. Thankfully, we had a satellite phone with us. One of my friends who went inside the camp out of the sight of that man called the police and campsite staff. We had no choice other than to let him stay with us, so we did as he asked. He also ate whatever food was left with us. Scared, we stood there watching him eating like wildly. After 20 hell-like minutes, we heard people coming from the sides. On seeing the police officers in their uniforms, the person tried to flee but was captured. One of the officers told us that he was the runaway fugitive and was wanted for 2 days. We spent the rest of the night at the office of the campsite guard and went back to the city early in the morning. One fine day in the middle of May, I decided to go fishing at the nearby lake. I asked my colleague if he would like to accompany me, knowing how much he loved fishing, and he agreed. We left at almost 11 in the morning, and the lake was a 20-minute drive from the city. Upon reaching there, we picked a spot, set up our things, and sat there sharing stories and laughter while our fishing rods were kept on the stand, their lines submerged in the water. The weather was ideal that day, with a gentle breeze. In the midst of our conversation, my rod twitched, indicating that something had bitten. A surge of excitement shot through me as I rolled the lever and reeled out my first catch of the day, a medium-sized fish. My colleague showcased his fishing skills and caught 3 more by the end of the day. However, fate had different plans for us. We set up a camp there by the evening and a grill for cooking the day's catch. While setting up, I felt the urge for the washroom. Excusing myself, I went to the public washrooms built nearby. On my way back, I heard some noises from behind. It was late in the evening, and despite the noises, I kept walking. Then, I heard someone falling. Thinking that someone needed help, I decided to go and check. On reaching near, I saw a few gangster-type people holding white pouches. A person was on the ground. I stood behind a tree, and on hearing some part of the conversation, I realized that they were selling drugs, and the person on the ground was responsible for delivering them today, but had failed to keep his promise. Sensing danger, I felt that running from there was the best thing to do before they saw me. I turned back to go to my colleague when suddenly my foot hit a broken branch, and I fell down. They stopped talking when they heard the noise, my heart pounding in my chest. I quickly got up and ran to hide somewhere safe. One of them came to check, and my breathing hitched at that moment, but on looking around and finding nothing, he went back. I kept hiding until I heard them go away. After I was satisfied that no one was there anymore, I stepped out of my hiding place with the thought of running straight to the campsite. However, as soon as I stepped out, one of the men saw me. They had not gone away, but were waiting there. I ran hard without thinking anything, and stopped only when I reached the camp. In between running, I made sure to take cuts and different routes so that those men couldn't catch me or find where I was going. On reaching there, I told my colleague everything that happened. He became worried too. We thought that the best thing to do now was to pack up quickly and leave, as I had seen their faces and heard their drug dealings. They would definitely not let me go that easily. With a sense of urgency, we packed our belongings swiftly and went towards where our car was parked. Fear overwhelmed us on our way back, as we were haunted by the possibility of those gangsters catching us. Rustling of leaves and crunching of twigs beneath our shoes sent shivers down our spines. The journey to the car seemed like a nerve-wracking endeavor. The path that we took in the morning to reach the campsite now turned into a labyrinth of shadows as anxiety engulfed us. Our footsteps echoed through the woods in the silence of the night. At that moment, we heard the voices of people nearby. Glancing at each other, we swallowed hard. We stopped and made sure no sound came from our shoes. Walking slowly and silently, we reached a juncture where 2 roads were leading to a parking spot. Hesitantly, we chose the one on the right side, hoping it would take us away from those gangsters. Thankfully, the voices became meager as we walked, and soon we could see our car. We took a sigh of relief on reaching the parking spot. At that time, the safety inside the closed doors of the car felt like the best thing that could happen. On reaching the car, we hurried to open the car door but fumbled with the car keys, as our hands were trembling with a mixture of fear and urgency. After getting into the car, a sense of relief washed over us. We turned on the engine, and the headlights pierced through the darkness. We sped away from the haunting thoughts of the gangsters approaching us. However, the sense of fear remained with questions like what if they had seen our car, or what if they had seen our car, or what if they followed us. On our way, the first thing we did was contact the police as soon as my mobile phone caught the signals. The police ensured our safety and alerted the nearest station to make sure we reached home safely. The day had been peaceful, filled with solitude. However, as the sun went down below the mountain peaks, the calm atmosphere changed into a wild storm, catching me off guard. I had come out to the mountains for solo camping to clear my mind and have some adventure all alone. However, the weather betrayed me and left me in the middle of the mountain with thunderstorms. Dark clouds gathered overhead in a moment, unleashing heavy pouring, drenching everything. I had to rapidly pack up my campsite and look for the shelter around. As I walked on the narrow mountain trail, with my boots slipping because of slippery mud and my breath visible in the air, as the rain intensified, panic set in, and my search for shelter turned desperate. Dark clouds had made the atmosphere dull and gloomy, making it hard to see clearly. Through the dim light, I spotted a hut-like structure some way away. I hurried there, gasping for breath. My clothes were drenched and sticking uncomfortably to my body. On closer look, it felt like an abandoned mountain shelter, its wooden structure weathered by years of neglect. For a moment, I contemplated going inside shelter, looked haunted, but having no other option available, I went inside. The door of the shelter opened with a creak, showing the interior, which was in worse condition than the exterior. Cobwebs were everywhere and dust-covered things were placed inside. It felt like this shelter was once made for the hikers, but now it was just forgotten. Ignoring the miserable interior of the shelter, I took a sigh of relief for getting a shelter from the heavy storm. I shook the water off myself in the struggle to make my wet clothes dry. The storm continued outside. Little to my knowledge, seeking refuge in this abandoned shelter was going to turn into a menace. After adjusting my eyes to the dim light inside, I started observing the surroundings. There were strange marks on the walls, as if someone had written cryptic messages there. Walking while trying to understand the sayings on the walls, my foot hit something and it fell. I was startled by that. I bent to see what had fallen when my eyes fell on the bundle of things in one corner covered with a cloth. The thing fell from there. With a deep breath, I lifted the cloth, revealing many things from jewelry to electronic devices. I was surprised to see these things, but before I could understand why those things were there, I heard heavy sounds of footsteps. My heartbeat quickened with the thought that I had stumbled upon a criminal hideout. The storm raged on, and so did the turmoil inside me. The gravity of the situation settled in as I realized my refuge took me to the hub of illicit activities. I knew I had to escape before those criminals came in. My mind raced, planning my next move. When for some time I didn't hear any footsteps, I went near a window carefully. Criminals' voices grew louder as they were discussing the plot for their next robbery. My fears proved right. It was indeed a criminal sanctuary. They were standing on the side of the shelter. I saw this as an opportunity to get out of here being unnoticed. I edged closer to the exit. A furious storm outside felt like a blessing at that moment, as they couldn't hear my steps. My heart raced as I got out and escaped that dungeon, like shelter. The path before me was dark and wide, but I knew I had to navigate it to reach somewhere safe. I moved swiftly, trying to put as much distance as possible between myself and those criminals. Hours passed as I was walking, tired and drenched to the bone. The intensity of the storm weakened. After walking some more, I saw a glimpse of the building, and luckily it turned out to be Ranger's Station. Hurriedly, I went to it and told the authorities about my encounter with the criminals, providing all the details about the shelter and things I saw there.